Hello and welcome to My Piano Method with me, Michelle Orp. This is my beginner to grade course, lesson 8. In today's lesson, we are going to learn all about the notes that go off the stave. So we've learned all about the notes on the stave. It's time to learn what happens when you go higher or lower on the piano. Okay, so these are all the notes that we've now learned on the stave. The very top of the right-hand stave, the treble clef stave, is that high G, and the very bottom of the left-hand stave, the bass clef, is an F. But what happens when we want to play notes that are above or below these two? Well, to do that, we would need to use ledger lines. Now, you probably recognise these from looking at sheet music. They're the little lines above and below the stave. And all they do is extend the stave for us when we need it to. So if I bring up another treble clef stave, you can see that I can add ledger lines underneath as well. And these ledger lines work for both the treble clef and the bass clef stave. I could change this bottom stave here to a bass clef and the ledger lines look exactly the same. Obviously the notes will change. So let's start with the treble clef. As we've just learned, all the notes in the spaces on the treble clef spell D face. So we know it starts with D in that very bottom space and then goes upwards spelling face, which means we know that that top space there is an E. So all we have to do is count up from there. So if we move up to the next available line, we have an F, we move up on our piano. If we move up another note, we get to a G in this space. And we just carry on going from there. So we can move up to the next line, it's an A. The next space is a B, and then a C, D, E, F, and so on. And if we take a look at ledger lines underneath the stave, it's exactly the same thing. So it still spells D face because we're in the treble clef. So that bottom space is a D, so let's put that in. And then all we do this time is we're moving backwards down our piano. So we're counting backwards through our notes. So we start on that D, the next note down is a C. This is middle C on the treble clef, as you should know. We keep moving down, next space will be a B, onto the next line is an A, next space is a G, and then an F, and then an E. So these are all the extra notes on a treble clef stave, and it's just a case of taking the note you do know and counting up and down from there. So if we do this with a bass clef, obviously we know it's slightly different with a bass clef because it spells face from that very bottom space. F at the bottom and then A, C and E. So all we do is we have to fill out what the other notes are. So we've got an E there at the top, which means the next line is an F, the next space is a G, and then an A on the line and a B at the top. So we know that this top space is a B. And then we just count up from there again. We know where the B is, so the next note up will be a C. Now this is middle C, because obviously we're in the bass clef now, and we know this is middle C of a bass clef. We keep moving up, so into the space it's a D, up again will be E, into the next space is an F, up again is a G, and up again is an A, and so on. And same again for ledger lines underneath the bass clef stave. If we look at our little trick, we know that it spells face, we know that F is that bottom space, so we can put an F in here. And then all we do is we go down our piano or keyboard, counting backwards. So we know that's an F, the next line down will be an E, into the next space will be a D, down again to C, and then B, and then A, and then G, and so on. So what we need to do when we're reading music is work out what these notes are by starting on a note that we do know. Now the last thing you need to know is that some of these notes are going to be the same if you're using different clefs. So here's an example. On the treble clef we have middle C and then D, E, F and G. On the bass clef we also have middle C and then it goes up D, E, F, G. So the notes we're looking at are exactly the same. The only difference is that on the treble clef stave you're playing them with your right hand, and on the bass clef stave you're playing them with your left hand. Now you will never see this piece of music because these notes are exactly the same and you can't play them with the same hand, with both hands at the same time. It's just impossible, so you'd never see this, there'd be no point. But what you might see is this. So now the treble clef is starting an octave higher, C, D, E, F, G, and the bass clef is starting from middle C, C, D, E, F, G. And this is a great example of when ledger lines are needed and used. So attached to the lesson today, I've added some worksheets for you to have a go at, and really do give them a go, because the more you go through this, the more you count up and down your notes and try and work out what's what, the easier it's going to be in the long run. And find different pieces of music with lots of different types of notes and just keep practicing and keep having a go. And this will really speed up your learning of reading sheet music. So I'm going to talk to you quickly about fingering, because now we're learning about higher notes and lower notes on the piano. We need to be able to reach those notes. Now, the good thing about fingering is that there are no set rules at all. It's all down to the individual player. So you decide what's right for you. Most pieces of music will have fingering suggestions, which is great because you can just follow them, and usually they've been tried and tested and that's why they are there. But they might not feel comfortable for you. Now, there are a few tips I can give you. The most important thing when it comes to fingering is to look ahead at the music. When you're learning a passage of music, you need to know roughly where you need to go. So you can look at the first line, and if all of the notes are in clusters, then you know you don't need to do much. You don't need to do much. But if you look ahead and you see some jumps, then you can start to think about what you might want to do. For instance, if the music is going from C to G up to G, then I'm unlikely to use my little finger on this G, because if I do, now I've got to do a bit of an uncomfortable jump to get up to here. Whereas if I'd looked ahead and noticed this big jump, I probably would have played the C and then gone to the G with my index finger and then up to the high G with my little finger. Because of course the biggest stretch is between your thumb and your index finger. So where you can, that's a great fingering move to use. You might not be able to. The music might be in a cluster and then jump up. Now that's a big jump from D to G, but you might have to do it, in which case what you don't want to do is, if you've been playing down here, is land on this D with your little finger and do a big jump. You want to try and close the gap as much as possible. So it's going to take time to remember what these notes are, and even now, after 20-30 years of playing the piano, I still sometimes look at a note that's right off the stave with a few ledger lines and don't immediately know what it is. It takes a moment. And for you guys, it's just going to take time and practice. And actually, there's no harm in just cheating. This is what lots of people do when they start. I still do it sometimes. Print out the sheet music and spend 5 minutes going through the notes and writing in what they all are. So when you're learning it, you can see very clearly what all the notes are. And this will actually help you remember them as well. So do feel free to do that when learning any new song.